But we're into a great topic. He's going to show you why atheism is from the pit of hell. Would you say just as bad as Islam or worse?
On par, maybe worse.
Okay, so there you go. So may the Holy Spirit bless our brother, fill you, fill us, magnify Jesus Christ. The floor is yours. I'm here to facilitate.
There's a lot more to atheism than we realize. And so the standard atheist narrative is completely false. So let me start. Let me just jump in. Okay. The series is called Atheism or Death, and Sam, I will share the slides with you so that you can review them and use them yourself. And we're going to talk about the atheist cult of reason, because atheism, modern atheism, literally started as a cult. And it was called the cult of reason. It was a religious cult. And yeah, we'll talk about its earlier history, but we're going to talk about its history of socialism, of violence and subversion, and also its very close connections to Satanism and to the occult. Right? Now, socialist atheism is a political religion. You cannot separate atheism from socialism. Atheism is a precursor requirement for socialism, and the two are integrated. So, the claims I'm going to make, and we're going to back this up through the series, socialism is a socio-political religion. It is a theocracy. It is a simulacrum of Christianity. Secular humanism is an atheist religious doctrine. It is a simulacrum of Christianity. It is, in other words, a copy of, it's a fake imitation, a cheap Chinese knockoff of Christianity. Atheism is religious, and it is inherently socialist and theocratic. Atheism and humanism are religions as per the US Supreme Court. Atheists went to the Supreme Court to argue that they are a religion, and the Supreme Court agreed. So atheists spent a lot of time and money to be formally recognized as a religion. So when the village atheist, which rhymes with village idiot, claims that atheism is not a religion, I refer you to the US Supreme Court. And the atheists who insisted, these highly educated atheist organizations with their money and their lawyers, they insisted they are a religion. And of course, now we're going to hear they're not real atheists. Atheism and secular humanism are historically violent and irrational. Atheism and humanism are proselytizing religions like Islam. Atheism in government is invariably totalitarian and genocidal. So a picture can express 1,000 words. So here's 2,000 words on atheism, and we're going to go through this presentation and we're going to show you exactly why. Right. So we'll start with modern atheism's roots. We go back about to the beginning of the 1700s, to roughly the mid-1700s, especially in France during the Enlightenment. And we're going to learn a great deal about that. This is a man called Diderot. He is an atheist philosopher. He wrote a lot about how to create social change, etc., etc. He wrote what was called he was one of the contributors to the Encyclopédie, which was a new encyclopedia of science. Science was replacing religion. This whole superstition was being replaced with this new idea, this new ideology of scientism, which atheism is obviously part of. And he wrote that, now don't forget, the Enlightenment is something atheists always appeal to as the age of reason, the age of rationality, and they appeal to all of these Enlightenment figures, these Enlightenment philosophers. And we're going to see just how racist and debauched, depraved, and satanic these people all were, and psychopathic too. So atheism in Diderot and d'Alembert's Encyclopédie is the opinion of those who deny the existence of a God in the world. The simple ignorance of God does not constitute atheism. To be charged with the odious, the dirty title of atheism, one must have the notion of God and reject it. Right, so this is where modern atheism starts. Right, now atheists will make all sorts of wonderful claims for their past. We'll get into all of that. But this is where modern atheism starts. It is to know there's a God and deny it. You can't simply have you can't simply have a little feelings that there's no God. But anyway, we'll move on. We'll discuss all that. With Voltaire, he advocated the destruction of religion. He once stated that he wanted to live long enough to see the last king strangled by the entrails of the last priest. implying he wanted to see the monarchy and Christianity violently destroyed. Pre-Enlightenment science did not exist as a motivator to push people to atheism. Back then, science was in its infancy, providing evidence that less academic factors were at play. Atheism is propagandized as intellectual, and in the future I will go through this history. I will go in detail through the history. Historically, it is linked to political and social factors, and it's a reaction to the establishment of the time. Basically, it is a belief that is in opposition to the status quo. It is always in opposition. Think about it. What is the opposite of theism? The opposite of theism is atheism. So atheism is not a default position. It is a reaction to theism.
Just want people to see that when atheists tell you they just want to be free of religion. No, they want to eradicate people with their religion, not just religion. Watch this.
Right, so no, atheism was not founded upon the slaying of God by the sword of reason, which is the image they try to evoke. It was simply rebellion against church and state with the intent to establish a new utopian state, with a new man in the image of man, not God. All right, so now Diderot, without going into too much detail of his history, he got into financial trouble. He sold his library, and it was bought, okay, by the monarch, the Empress Catherine the Great of Russia. She was a fan of his work. With her patronage, her money, Diderot completed his philosophical program, and because he had the leisure to stay with her for 2 years or whatever, and he was able to add a dimension of political radicalism. And he traveled to St. Petersburg. He was there 1773 to 1774. And with the money that he earned, he was able to enter into a leisurely retirement in Paris where he continued to write. So he was a real champagne socialist. He wanted to kill the monarchy, except when they wanted to give him a lot of money. Then it was convenient. Right? Right, so that's Diderot. So that's the definition of atheism. It is an active rejection, an active denial of God. It's not simply this patently stupid lack of belief. We'll discuss that in the future. So atheism is the cult of reason. During the French Revolution, reason referred to a belief in rationality, science, and the rejection, the active rejection of traditional religious beliefs and practices. But not only that, active rejection of the current structures of the world, the way the world was structured. So the cult of reason emerged during the French Revolution, seeking to replace Christianity with a new religion, a religion based on reason and rationality as they defined these words. So the cult of reason was founded in 1793 as part of the de-Christianization movement, which was a government program. It was led by radical revolutionaries who believed that traditional religions of Europe were oppressive and irrational. And the way that they were going to get rid of traditional religion was by murdering all of the religious people. And a new religion based on reason and rationality was needed to replace them. So the cult was based on the principles of Enlightenment philosophy, which emphasized reason and rationality in human affairs. And the cult's leaders believed that reason was the key to unlocking the potential of humanity to make men gods, creating a more just and equitable society, socialism. Now, this aligns, and we will find out, this aligns with both socialism. We're looking at Marx, Lenin, Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot, as well as Satanism. This aligns perfectly. Atheism and Satanism are perfectly compatible. And we're going to be having a look at that as we go. And the cult of reason believed that reason was the only legitimate basis for both morality and ethics, that traditional religious beliefs and practices were irrational and superstitious. The members all rejected a supernatural god, and they worshipped the goddess of reason. In other words, they worshipped Isis, the Egyptian pagan deity, who was their goddess of reason. And this was personification of the cult's values and beliefs. Although this cult of reason was very short-lived, it had a huge impact on the course of the French Revolution and the development of modern secularism, atheism, and also what we now call scientific socialism. So now we'll talk about a guy called Plutarch. Plutarch is a philosopher, Greek philosopher. So the atheist French government recycled old ideas of primitive religion that they acquired from Plutarch. He was the most read philosopher amongst the Enlightenment thinkers and the people in the French Revolution. So they took these old, primitive, pagan ideas and they refashioned them into the new state religious cults. They started two cults. One was the cult of reason, and the other was the cult of the supreme being. They were enlightened because they were based upon nature, and reason, not special revelation from God. That's what they believed. Because now one of the things that they realized was they couldn't simply leave a vacuum of belief. They needed to have something that gave people something to believe in, structures. They couldn't simply remove the old supports from society. So they had to develop religions that mimicked religions, provided these social functions religion provided, but were not Christian. Now let's have a look at Plutarch. This is an interesting book by Alan Brown. It's 60 pages, will cost you $5 on Amazon. And it's How Socialist Was National Socialism. And he explains how National Socialism, National Communism was communism. It's just Marx had his version of communism, and Mussolini had his version of communism or socialism, and this guy had his version of socialism. But he says, but Gray utilizes Plutarch to great effect, and the Greek's words could easily read like a description of Nazi Germany. So the most famous philosopher of the French Revolution, atheists, and of these Enlightenment atheists that atheists appealed to, sounds like a Nazi. So he, the leader, trained his fellow citizens to have neither the wish nor the ability to live for themselves. But like bees, they were to make themselves always integral parts of the whole community, socialist. Clustering around their main leader, almost beside themselves with enthusiasm and noble ambition, and to belong wholly to their country. So they had to worship the dear leader. These are the beliefs of Plutarch. This is what he believes a perfect state is like. Gray's point is that in ancient Sparta, the individual was completely subordinated to the general ends of the community, and such subordination is of the very essence of socialism. So Plutarch was effectively a socialist. Yeah, Keo says very correctly, everything within the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state. Very, very true. That is correct. I believe that's a statement by Mussolini. So yes, every man was implanted with the conviction that he belonged not to himself, but to the state. So do you see the ideas that these French Enlightenment thinkers were taking? Were ideas that are not what we would call enlightened at all. Now we'll mention an atheist occult enlightenment. So I need to put a few pieces on the table, as I usually do, and then I'll start tying those pieces together. For the French revolutionaries, or you can call them for the French jihadis, nature was a way to legitimize their policies and laws, equated with the rule of law during the mythical Golden Age. The leaders of the revolution repackaged pre-Christian religious traditions as a new, rational, and natural religious system for the French Republic. Remember, this is the very first atheist republic, where atheism has become the state religion. And in fact, Christianity is outlawed. It's illegal, and you will be killed. And in fact, they start the world's first modern genocide, and they become the first police state because atheism is so rational. So these laws, so religious system of the French Republic, stripping off the superstition of the church and returning man to a mythical golden age guided by general revelation. So by man's brilliance. This is man worshipping himself. Right, thanks, Author Christos. So these state religions married paganism to the then in vogue, quote-unquote, natural philosophy, proclaiming the new syncretic belief as rational. The French thinkers turned to their personal libraries to gain insight into what primitive religion looked like. So the French revolutionaries, the Enlightenment thinkers, studied pagan religion, primitive religion. So they took elements from long-defunct religions and heretical practices, then proclaimed that the state's authority came from nature herself, not the Judeo-Christian God, the church, or the monarchy. Any thoughts, Sam, before I go on?
It's becoming quite obvious, the satanic roots of atheism, in that its goal is to eradicate Christianity. Isn't that a common feature of all these religions like Islam?
Yes.
Which shows you that it's satanic at its very core. It is of the devil, because their goal is eradicate Christianity. What a coincidence. But
yes. Now we're going to one of the sources I'm using here is John V. Fleming, The Dark Side of the Enlightenment. It's called Wizards, Alchemists, and Spiritual Seekers in the Age of Reason. You must understand that the French Revolution, they speak of reason. In the Enlightenment, they speak of reason. What they do forget to mention is that these people were all occultists, and we're going to be digging into some of that. All of these people were occultists, Satanists, you name it. I mean, you'll see the clues are all there. John Fleming's book discusses Rosicrucianism along with alchemy and other occult experiences in England and Germany, with some discussions of the French experience. Enlightenment philosophers throughout Europe nurtured the flame of occultism. Enlightenment philosophers were occultists. And through practices such as Freemasonry, they enabled the fire to flare up again. So these philosophers that atheists worship today were occultists. Your will be done versus God's will. Now, atheists will say religion and all these things. Greeks a sprinkle of Romans, but the French and Germans really did turbocharge this cult. They did. Now, it's all just superstition. That's what you basically hear atheists say. This is all just superstition. But that is a Marxist position. That is a Leninist position. In fact, that's a heretical position as well. But basically, atheists are in perfect alignment with Marx, Lenin, Mao, Pol Pot on that point, that that's all superstition, because they believe that history has a purpose, that man has to evolve, and that religion was a superstition that must be abandoned for the new science of humanity, which Marx is going to bring you, Lenin is going to bring you, the French Revolution, and we're going to see the atrocities, the barbarity that they descended into. It's far worse than people realize. So now this idea that it's all superstition overlooks very important distinctions. The occult is distinct from a religion in fundamental ways. Marx was a Satanist, Abdelmasih. Marx actually wrote satanic poems. He actually wrote poems. He was very fond of the idea of satanic practices. He wrote, shall we say, in fond ways about Satan, as did Engels. You'll find this in their writings. So, yeah. All of these people were involved in some ways in the occult or influenced by the occult. So religion tries to understand the world. The occult, you try to exert control over the world. I know that they try to say, oh, religions just try to control you. Well, no, you're trying to understand the world. With the occult, you're trying to master the world. You're trying to exert control over it through spells. But Christianity is logos. God is logos. We do not reject science or reason. The occult embraces irrationality and immorality. Christian religion is based on belief in God. We pray for guidance, but the occult, they use rituals to cast spells or curses. Christianity requires spiritual growth. Occultism seeks power to manipulate by means of rituals. And God is logos. Once again, occult practitioners believe in forces that are beyond reason. Again, when I've spoken of the Sufis in the past, they believe in going to doing these rituals that take them into these states that are beyond reason. They call them post-rational or pre-rational states, right? So an occultists usually operate in secret. There's nothing secret within Christian practice. Let me continue. I just wanted to throw that in there just to put some basic ideas out. So now we're going to look at Jonathan Israel, very well-known, very famous historian. He said the radical enlightenment cannot be simply equated with atheism. So in other words, not only equated with atheism, and he says here the radical enlightenment. Effectively, there were two enlightenments. Religious people played an important part in the radical enlightenment, as they did in the French Revolution, but they were always Unitarians or Socinians of some kind.
Oh, I love that part. Guys, did you catch it? These radical enlightenment Satanists, they were Unitarians. They outright reject the deity of Christ, and they assume he is merely a human. And if you guys don't know what Socinians are, you find them today. They go under different disguises. One disguise is Christadelphians. So it's a rejection of the Trinity and the deity of Christ, masked under being enlightened. Good. Did you just hear, again, another fruit of the Reformation? Socinianism, Christadelphianism, is the fruit of the Reformation, where every man with his own Bible becomes his own pope. This is the fruit of Martin Luther and the reformers like John Calvin. Keep that in mind. These are facts. Facts don't care about your feelings. Go ahead, brother.
So I'll continue. So, for instance, this is Jonathan Israel, the Radical Enlightenment. And he says, the Radical Enlightenment rejected all compromise with the past. It sought to sweep away existing structures entirely, aiming for a complete elimination of quote-unquote, well, Christian religious authority. I'm inserting the word Christian here, but this is what is meant, right? Suleiman the Magnificent funded the Protestants at the early stages, correct. And I discussed that the last time we did the show. I showed that connection. I showed the actual deep ties between between the Muslims and and the things that were happening. So there's a lot there that is very uncomfortable. If you're a Protestant, like I'm a Protestant, it is very uncomfortable to look at these facts. So understand, the radical enlightenment is now, today, in 2023, coming to fruition. Men can now be pregnant. I mean, today I was very gratified to see an 85-year-old woman got up from her seat and she gave a pregnant man her seat on the bus. I thought that was beautiful. That was beautiful, Sam. So understand, they sought to sweep away all structures, not just the church, but everything had to go. They needed to burn the whole system down and start fresh with this new crazy idea that they had. All right. So now let's have a look. Look at the kind of artwork that these guys produced. It's very religious in nature, but it's very Greek as well. And you might notice this very familiar looking salute here. Look familiar, Sam?
Hey, where did we see that before?
I don't know. I don't know. But it looks very nasty. Looks very nasty. Very nasty.
Oh.
Very.
To do with Nazism.
Plutarch was the most frequently read author by men during the French Revolution, and a very famous painter, and also someone who signed a lot of death warrants, called Jacques-Louis David. His work, such as The Oath of the Rati, you've just seen the painting, it became the official artistic style of the revolutionary government and eventually shaped the religious aesthetics of the state's secular cults, religious aesthetics of the atheist cults. Fascinating. These same names of these people in the French Revolution are associated with occult mysticism, with magic, Rosicrucians, Freemasons, etc. Freemasonry lodges allow different social strata to interact, promoting skepticism and intellectual inquiry. These two are both propagandistic words. I'm not going to get into this now, but the word skepticism, there's an interesting history there. It doesn't mean what you think it means. The famous Neuf Soir Lodge in Paris had members such as Voltaire, the Abbé Sieyès, and the designer of the Republican calendar, Charles Gilbert Rome. We'll discuss that in a minute. And occultist, Antoine Court de Gebelin. And the Freemasonry lodges were catalysts in the years preceding the Revolution, and the Scottish Rite Freemasonry gained popularity in Catholic France during the 18th century. So we taught touching on Freemasonry. So this is Marat, Jean-Paul Marat. He was a martyr for the revolution. His death, his assassination, kicked off the reign of terror and created the first atheist police state. So the first atheist state became the first atheist police state. Freemason, Freemason, I need to point that out. Jean-Paul Marat wanted heads to roll. From September 1793 to July 94, roughly 2,000 people monthly were publicly beheaded in Paris, mainly for their unwillingness to support the atheist jihad. Sorry, the atheist revolution. How am I mixing these words? He wasn't. Sorry. And so an anti-Christian eulogy was given by the atheist Marquis de Sade. Now the word, his name is the source of the word sadism, the word sadist. Wow. And Marquis de Sade was an atheist, and he compared Marat to Jesus Christ. Amongst other things, what they wrote was, "O heart of Jesus, O heart of Marat, their Jesus was but a false prophet, but Marat is a god. Long live the heart of Marat. Like Jesus, Marat detested nobles, detested priests, the rich, the scoundrels. Like Jesus, he led a poor and frugal life." Wow. And also what they... Sorry, go on.
Sorry. So he's now deifying the Jean-Paul Marat?
Yes.
My goodness, man, what blasphemy. Go ahead, brother. It just shocked me, these quotes.
This was standard practice. These were atheists, don't forget. But don't worry, Sam. Just like Islam's a religion of peace, so you can show your address to people online now, live, no problem. Okay. I live on number 123 Bakalaka Dhaka Street. Okay, just so you guys know. By the same token, atheism is just a lack of belief. It doesn't write anything. It doesn't make any ideas. It's just a lack of belief. Another thing to note is that what they did was they arranged his body, they put him on a chair, like on a throne, and they arranged his body to make him look regal so that they, when you see psychopaths in the movies, they always arrange the bodies. They murder someone and they arrange the body in an artistic rendition. These psychopaths in the French Revolution did that a lot. They did a lot of taking these bodies and arranging them in very macabre situations. So yeah, that's Marat, and it's made to look like he was Jesus here, basically. This whole the Marquis de Sade, an induced abortion. Now, this is from the National Library of Medicine, from the National Institutes of Health, and it's the National Center for Biotechnology Information. In 1795, the Marquis de Sade published his book, Le Philosophique dans le Boudoir, in which he proposed the use of induced abortion for social reasons and as a means of population control. It is from this time that medical and social acceptance of abortion can be dated. Had not been discussed in public in modern times, because we don't want to see that an atheist and a sadist, the originator of the word sadism, had been the guy calling for abortion and population control. It was largely due to de Sade's writing that induced abortion received the impetus which resulted in its subsequent spread in Western society. De Sade held that all life was cheap. He held all life cheaply and spent most of his life attacking God and the Christian church. His book attacks established religion, morality, family ties, and social structures. And he advocates sodomy, incest, lust, and cruelty for its own sake. So he viewed that man is not responsible for his own existence and God, blah, blah. Anyway, he just went against everything religious. The realistic view, according to de Sade, was that since murder is such a trivial matter, destruction of an infant which has not achieved the age of reason is of small consequence. Now, here he's not talking about babies in the womb, right? Because don't forget, with the Romans, before a child was 2, the father could terminate that child. They could kill that child with no penalty from the state, because that child under the age of 2 was considered to have not been developed. He hasn't developed a conscience, hasn't developed any kind of soul or reasoning. He's just an animal, an insect. Kill him, move on. And this is what they wanted to go back to. This is an atheist. Atheists need to own this.
And that's what we're seeing today. In fact, maybe you can confirm. I forgot the name. Even Planned Parenthood was started by a woman, and she deliberately targeted the black community because she wanted to bring the black community down and reduce their numbers. From what I was
social control. Yes. Yep.
It was all saying. So, you see where it comes from? It comes from this.
We're about to learn that he wasn't a true Muslim. Sorry, he wasn't a real atheist. We're going to learn that any moment now, you know. Okay, so in 1795, the atheist Marquis de Sade published his book, and he said that all life is cheap, and he attacked the Christian church, right? He then advocated sodomy and incest, right? And lust and cruelty for its own sake. And this is what he said. Okay, so this comes from, there's the link, pubmed.ncbi.nlm. Just look for the article. Marquis de Sade and induced abortion. So you'll see that this is a legitimate article. I'm not making this up. Okay. And if you look for some of the photos that were drawn by some of the books he wrote, I mean, man, it's all just sexual perversion. It's crazy. Now let's have a look at woke. Let's look at the origin of woke, and let's look at these fantastic Greeks that these atheists now appeal to. Why do they want all these famous Greeks? They appeal to them. Let's look at Aristophanes, who was a Greek playwright. We're going to Athens in the year 392 BC. The great urban Dionysia, when Aristophanes presented his comedy called Ecclesiazusei, or the Congress Women. So he depicts a teaching that was very fashionable in Athens at the time, right? And these are the people that are lauded by these atheists as the great thinkers, the great reasoners of Greece, and we want to go back to them. And this is where the French Revolution went. So the great Dionysia is also called City Dionysia. It's an ancient dramatic festival in which tragedy, comedy, and satirical, this is satire, right? But he was making fun of real things. Where this drama originated, it was held in Athens in March in honor of Dionysus, the god of wine. Okay, so the Congress women. The women of the city, wearing beards and dressed in men's clothing, come to the assembly and by a majority vote pass a resolution transferring all power in the state to women. Would that sound a little bit like feminazism?
Most definitely. And there's a picture, a woman with a beard, huh?
Yeah, I just thought I'd add this in there. And then also, like the French revolutionaries, one of them at least wanted everyone to wear the same clothing. I don't know where he got that idea.
Yeah.
Equality.
It's all converging again to one common source, isn't it? It's all connected.
The women use this power to introduce a series of political measures. And these are expounded in a dialogue between Praxagora, the leader of the women, and her husband, Bleperos. Here are some quotations. Praxagora, compulsory, universal community property. In other words, everybody owns everyone else's property. The people own the property. This is what I propose. Across the board, economic equality to fill those fissures that scar our society's face. No more division between rich and poor. Does this sound familiar, Sam?
Yeah, but isn't it ironic that the elite want to stay rich and make us poor and collapse the middle class, even though here it says no rich and poor. So it's all a lie.
Yep.
They stay in power while they subjugate us. That's what it is.
Yep, of course. We will wear the same clothes. We will share the same food. My initial move will be to communalize the land and money and all property. And he says, but what about the landless man who is invisibly wealthy because he hides his money, his gold, in his pockets? What about him? And his wife says he will deposit all of his money in the fund. She doesn't explain how they're going to get him to give up his money and just put it in the public fund, but everybody's going to get everybody's money, right? I will knock out the walls. I will remodel the city into one big happy household where all can come and go as they choose. In other words, no borders, no borders, none of that border stuff. I'm pooling the women. I'm creating a public hoard for the use of every man who wishes to take them to bed and make babies. Right. And who's going to work the land and produce the food? And she says the slaves. So this leaves you just one function. When shades of night draw on, slip sleekly down to dinner. The state is not going to stint. We're not going to be cheap. The state's hand is full and open. Its heart is large. It'll stuff its menfolk free of charge, then issue them torches when dinner's done and send them out to hunt for fun. Now, this last quote is very reminiscent of Karl Marx. And Karl Marx had a very special affection towards his father, with whom he read Voltaire and Rousseau. And Voltaire and Rousseau shared very similar ideas to what we've just seen. Woke and socialism goes all the way back to pagan Greece. These Enlightenment thinkers went all the way back to pagan Greece. So yes, Sam, we can trace all of this back to pagan Greece. These are pagan ideas that the atheists have embraced and said, this is reason, this is rationality.
You know, here's what's a contradiction. She says that the slaves will work the land, but I thought we're all going to be one and equal. There's no division, but obviously... Don't
confuse me with the facts, Sam. Exactly. This is going to hurt my brain.
So, and even in this system, you still have humans who will be subjugated. So much for we're all the same. All right.
Yeah, do you understand? This is irrational. As I said, they embrace irrationality. They embrace contradiction. For them, there is no contradiction. It's whatever they decide is rational, is rational. It's not logos, it's anti-logos. So, atheism's anti-enlightenment. Now, this is William Kilpatrick's Christianity, Islam, and Atheism, the struggle for the soul of the West. It's helpful to think in terms of two enlightenments. The enlightenment that was nourished. Yeah, everyone's a slave, of course. Yes, everyone will be a slave, yeah. This philosophy, you need to listen to oh, good, I've just forgot his name now. New Discourses, James Lindsay. You need to listen to he's the heavyweight in this. This man's work is phenomenal right now on this. So there was the enlightenment that was nourished by Christianity and the enlightenment that cut itself off from God. The first enlightenment, the Christian enlightenment, led to the American Revolution, the Declaration of Independence, the abolition of slavery, and the Civil Rights Movement. The radical enlightenment led to the French Revolution, the atheist reign of terror, the suppression of church by state, and the godless philosophies of Marx and Nietzsche and their offspring, the National Socialism of Hitler and communism. More recently, the abandonment of God has led to the regime of cultural relativism that regards rights as arbitrary constructions. So atheism, taken to its logical conclusion, and many atheists do say this, that you have no rights because the universe is random. There are no rights. There's only survival of the fittest, right? Whoever has the power. Basically, it's the law. It's the golden rule. Whoever has the gold makes the rules. Yes. So you see, all of these ideas are not Christian. Yes, Sam, you want to say something?
So you're basically telling me the way American politics is headed, it's heading to implementing this very idea, because this sounds like the progressives in America.
It is. It's the same idea. It goes back to 2,500 years ago, and it goes into the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, atheism. We're going to. I'm really just putting the pieces on the table. Is it making sense so far, Sam?
It is not only making sense. It's actually scary because what you're telling me sounds like what I hear from our politicians on television, on YouTube, specifically the liberal progressives. This is what they're arguing for and pushing for. Pretty much they want to implement the system. This is what you hear. Now we know the source. It all goes back to the same source, and it's satanic and anti-Christian, anti-Christ.
Yes, all of it. Man was devalued the moment God was dispensed with. So the first instance occurred when Enlightenment worship of abstract reason and liberty degenerated quickly into the mass murders committed during the anti-religious Reign of Terror in France. "Liberty, what crimes are committed in your name?" said Madame Roland as she faced the Statue of Liberty. Yes, the Statue of Liberty, that little French thing, in the Place de la Révolution, moments before her death at the guillotine. She was one of the early victims of a succession of secular systems based on ruthless notions of liberty, equality, and reason. So these were man-made designs of what is liberty? Well, I think it is. And then you had a bunch of philosophers arguing over these terms, what they meant, what kind of political system, social system need to be constructed. There was nothing based on an idea of God, nothing that was transcendent. Everything was purely temporal, based on whoever could convince you this was the meaning of that word at the time. As many historians have pointed out, the atheist regimes of modern times are guilty of far more crimes than any committed in the name of religion. We're going to go into specifics. We're going to bring up numbers. We're going to go into stats. Atheists lie to you about Christianity. You know, atheism is the #1 big-time murderer in all of history. Modern atheism is the #1 big-time mass murderer in all of history. So, communist governments alone were guilty of more than 100 million murders, most of them committed against their own people, and that's only in the 20th century, right? So we're going to talk about more of that. This is, I'm just quoting from the book. Actually, I'm going to bring up that quote by Dostoevsky. So, thanks to the new crop of atheist boosters, we hear a lot about the 500-year-old crimes of the Inquisition. But less than 2 decades after the collapse of godless communism, there's an eerie silence about the mass graves of the Soviet Gulag. Right? Atheists got to go back 500 years, 800 years, you know, whereas we can go back just a couple of decades and we can say, well, hey, what about these 200 million people that were killed by atheist governments, formerly atheist governments? And there's Fyodor Dostoevsky. Someone, there's the very same quote. If there is no God, then everything is permitted. So now, atheism or death, like Islam, but atheist. Let's look at the atheist policy of de-Christianization by murder by the French atheist state. On September 2, 1792, at Caen prison in Paris, over 100 Catholic priests were jailed within an old monastery. Their crime? Refusing to give up Christianity for the beliefs of the new secular atheist republic. A mob stormed the prison, and they slaughtered 115 priests. That bloodbath was just one of several remembered as the September massacres. Over 4 days, from the 2nd to the 6th, up to 1,614 people were known to have been murdered because they were Christians. Because they would not accept atheism. Because, as you know, Sam, atheism is a religion of peace. The atheist purge. These atrocities were part of a deliberate, escalating campaign of violence known as de-Christianization. This was government policy. It was passed into law. The atheists passed law by which atheists violently purged religion from France in the name of reason and rationality. Atheists like Pierre Chaumet and Jacques Hébert argued that this was necessary so that reason would triumph over superstition and fanaticism. In other words, they murdered hundreds of thousands of people because to get rid of superstition, so that reason would triumph over superstition. They needed to murder maybe 500,000 people.
And yet you just showed it's steeped in the occultism. Occultism.
We're going to get it.
So here's what's ironic. They want to get rid of Christianity superstition to embrace another superstitious system, occultism. Yeah. Very rational. Yeah.
Entirely rational. It's a religion of peace, Sam. It's rational. In their eyes, churches were weeds in need of plowing so that their enlightened ideas could grow. Crosses received from altars, bells were plundered and melted down. Now, the very same were done by, quite bluntly, in Protestant history, the Protestants did exactly the same. The calendar was changed from a 7-day week to a 10-day week. Sundays were removed from the calendar so that there would be no day to worship. That's what the French did. The secularists no longer wanted to base their dating system on the birth of Jesus. They based it upon the birth of their revolution. Now, I will let you know, the Soviet Union did the very same. The Soviet Union removed Sunday so there would be no day of worship. And the Islamic calendar, the Islamic Hijrah calendar, also did not want to be dated on the birth of Jesus. They dated it on the birth of their revolution.
But here's what's interesting, Lloyd. Now, guys, see this quote? They don't want to date it from the birth of Christ. Well, guess what they're doing now? And you know this. Now they talk about BCE and CE, before Common Era and Common Era. So, guys, did you see? It's been a concerted effort to remove Jesus from our calendar. So when you Christians say BCE, CE, you're following their satanic agenda. So instead of saying BC, before Christ, AD, Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord, they're saying BCE, before Common Era.
Before communism and before the communist era. Sorry. Yeah. Before communism.
Which, again, what made it common? It was the birth of Christ. So don't fall for that. Do not use BCE and CE. BC and AD in their face.
All right. Yeah. So the worship of reason, paganism returns. So this is the goddess of reason, right? This is the goddess of reason. And this is the ceremony where these atheists are now worshiping the goddess of reason, taking her through the streets. Atheists tried to replace Christianity with their own belief system. The cult of reason was the very first state-sponsored atheistic religion. It was a godless alternative to churches where citizens could hear sermons that instilled virtue without any biblical language. In other words, when you had a funeral, they would talk about decomposition. Now, the churches were deconsecrated into temples of reason, devoted to the worship of reason, personified as a woman bearing a torch. You might look familiar. See anything familiar, Sam?
So this is actually a symbol of the goddess of reason? I didn't even know that. Wow.
The atheists made up their own holiday for it, the Festival of Reason, held on 10th November 1793 at Notre Dame Cathedral. Now, of course, we've all heard, you may have heard stories of how they deconsecrated Notre Dame Cathedral by having prostitutes and having skimpily or naked women walking around the altar. And apparently they had sex with the prostitutes on the altar to deconsecrate it. Because that's reasonable. That's what you do when you're reasonable. And in fact, Sam, that's scientific. That's scientific atheism right there. Altars were rededicated to truth and liberty. The festival was not a dignified ceremony, but a spectacle, a Mardi Gras or a pride parade. Lady Liberty, Liberty enlightening the world, replaced Virgin Mary on several altars to symbolize Enlightenment thinking. See, they just replace. They actually just replace your symbols with their symbols. So, the cult of reason was based on the principles of enlightenment. Its guiding principle was to exercise reason. It was anti-clerical in the extreme. Also, anti-clericalism is found in pre-Protestant heresy and then taken up by Martin Luther. Right? I will get into that. Its goal was the perfection of man through the attainment of truth and liberty via reason. In other words, Gnosticism and the Hermetic wisdom of the ages, very similar to the socialist man made in the image of man. It encouraged congregational worship and devotional displays based on reason, thus the Festival of Reason. This was the atheist way of being reasonable and scientific by having pagan, occult, Greek occult ceremonies. Okay, since we're talking about reason and the Enlightenment was awesome and blah, blah, let's have a look at the Humanist Canada website. They have profound respect. Humanism is a philosophy or life stance based on profound respect for human dignity and the conviction that we're all ultimately accountable to ourselves and to society for our actions. Our worldview is deity-free and without the reliance upon a belief in the supernatural. Reason and science are the best ways to understand the world, and compassion should be the basis for how we act towards each other. Remember these words: compassion, reason, science. Remember these words, please. We live in a fair and equal society. That's all we want, a fair and equal society. Through our ceremonies, hold on, why is an atheist organization having ceremonies, Sam? Because the word ceremony is a church, you have church ceremonies. And through our educational services and we bring humanism to communities across the country. In other words, they are proselytizing, they're evangelizing their atheism, and they're raising awareness on the national stage. They are propagandizing. You see, they are mimicking religion. They're a simulacrum of religion. Now let's have a look at the 7 fundamental tenets of the Satanic Temple. Let's see if these atheist humanists have any similar, just roughly similar ideas. Let's have a look. We need to strive to act with compassion and empathy towards all creatures with reason. Sam? If you're an atheist, you need to have compassion and act with reason. We want justice, okay? And justice is a necessary pursuit that should prevail over laws. So if the law was wrong and you believe that justice, your justice, your truth is greater than the law of the land, you need to pursue your truth, even if it goes against the law and the institutions. You see, you need to change the law, you see? And beliefs should conform to one's best scientific understanding of the world. This is scientific Satanism. This is not just regular. This is not your mama's Satanism or your grandpa's Satanism. This is scientific Satanism. And you should take care never to distort scientific facts because, as you know, men can get pregnant. Don't be a bigot. And every tenet is a guiding principle designed to inspire nobility in action and thought. The spirit of compassion, of wisdom and justice should always prevail over the written or spoken word. And this is identical to Islam's concept of niyat, intention over outcome. The Sharia must always be more important than man-made laws. See? So your subjective sense stands over and above the law. There's no difference between this and Islam.
A lot of people don't know that Satanism is not necessarily worship of Satan, but worship of self. Do what thou will, not God's will. Because that was Satan's lie to Adam and Eve. You can be your own God, do your own thing. Just keep that in mind. Yeah.
No, we're going to we'll tie all of this together. So this is the creed of the Satanic Temple, which, as you should know, is enlightened. Okay? So don't forget, scientific atheists, humanists claim to follow the Enlightenment philosophy, right? The rational philosophy. And so does the Satanic Temple, oddly enough. Let us continue here, right? Now, Satanic atheism, it's enlightened. You need to remember this, right? LaVey's, now this is Anton LaVey, one of the arch-atheists and, well, one of the arch-Satanists of the 20th century. LaVey's Satanism is atheistic. It is a carnal religion. Carnal means to do with sex, okay? So LaVey's Satanism is atheistic. Followers believe that all gods are fictitious, that ultimate importance is found in the self. And pursuing self-interests, Satan is not a deity, but a metaphor. The ultimate adversary of irrationality and religious beliefs. So religious beliefs are irrational and Satan is rational. Satan stands against religious beliefs. Satan stands against the Logos. Satan is rational. It's a metaphor. It is you defying the system that I mentioned in the beginning. You can have secular symbolism, ritual, and pageantry. So in other words, even though it is an atheistic religion, they worship Satan, it's atheistic. You can have secular symbolism, ritual, and pageantry, theater. And it's very effective and something that is part of the nature of the human animal. The ritual chamber can be a place where you can dramatically perform what I call self-transformational psychodrama. We release the emotions that we find would be injuring us in the regular pursuit of our happiness so that we can then let them go. This is narcissism. Understand? This is talking about narcissism. It is found in the self and pursuing self-interest. This is all about you, right? And now let's have a look at Lucian Greaves. He is the spokesperson for the Satanic Temple. It's not that we're just looking for disorder, chaos, and to undermine Western civilization. In fact, we're really trying to endorse for Enlightenment values. The Satanic Temple is really endorsing Enlightenment values. We are bringing reason and respect for science into bettering the human condition. That's what the Satanic Temple really does. Enlightenment values, science, and reason, Sam. Yes. Isn't that what atheism does? They endorse for Enlightenment values and they bring reason and respect for science, and they want to better. Satanism and atheism say literally the same things and have very same values, which should be no surprise. The temple's 7 tenets speak to this worldview. They ask followers to act with compassion. Oh, that word again, compassion. To respect the freedom of others and to take care that beliefs don't distort scientific facts. Men can get pregnant. Don't be a bigot. Now, let's look at Aaron Ra, arch-atheist who came out as a Satanist not that long ago. Why did I join the Satanic Temple? Why? Because the Satanists are the good guys. That's on his Twitter, by the way. And this is Aaron Ra. He's an atheist activist. Now, he's doing atheism wrong because he doesn't just have a lack of belief. Someone didn't tell him how to do atheism. Does he even atheism, bro? Sam?
So he actually said this because there was a clip.
Yes, this is on his Twitter. I don't need any rituals. I joined to support the human rights activism.
Okay. So he did join.
This is on his Twitter. I took this off his Twitter a week ago.
All right.
He has become a Satanist. He's still an atheist, though, but he's a Satanist. And the Satanic Temple alleges Idaho abortion laws violate blah, blah, blah. So the Satanic Temple has filed 2 court cases just in Indiana against anti-abortion laws. So this is their human rights activism, so that abortion can be made legal. Just so you know that Satanists, there's a claim you will find commonly that there's always at least one atheist within who's part of a covenant, part of the Satanic Church, who is always in every abortion clinic because they want to be there as part of any ceremonies that kills a baby. Because when they can do this, if they kill the child, they can use that as part of a satanic ritual to enact a spell. So this is part of their process. Right. So now, atheistic woke Satanism. Satan respects your pronouns. And here we have the Baphomet. Satan respects your pronouns. Alrighty-o, that looks friendly. Woke is satanic, atheism is satanic, and woke is Marxist. And Marxism is, we know that woke is Marxist. We know that woke is atheist. Now, trust me, this is one little circle jerk going on here. Satan loves you and respects who you are. You're important and valuable, and you deserve to treat yourself with love and respect. I've been thinking a lot lately about the Satanic Temple and the Church of Satan. They are so misunderstood and demonized. Yes, and LGBTFU plus people are so often referred to as being the product of Satan or going against God's will. Satanists don't actually believe in Satan. He's used as a symbol of passion, a symbol of pride and liberty. He means to you what you need him to mean. For me, Satan is hope, compassion, equality, and love. See, it's atheistic Satanism. They will tell you afterwards that not all Satanists are atheists. Some Satanists believe in Satan. Some Satanists believe in Isis, the other goddess that we just was part of the French Revolution, that the goddess of reason. So that's fascinating. Satanists who believe in Isis, the goddess of reason that was worshipped in the French Revolution, and that's just a coincidence. Naturally, Satan respects pronouns. He loves all LGBTFU plus people. The Church of Satan openly accepts LGBTFU plus people. It has done since it was created. And the more recent Satanic Temple accepts them too with open arms. Here's a guy that's going, well, I'm an atheist and I haven't murdered anyone. I haven't started a French Revolution. It's like you're still, well, first of all, atheism is a doctrine. It has a very dirty history. It is tied to all of these things very historically. So the fact that you don't particularly do these means that, it's like not all Muslims are jihadis yet. They haven't done violent jihad yet. It is part of their doctrine. It is written into the fabric of the doctrine. It is their law. So the fact is that they haven't done it yet just means they haven't done it yet. That's all. You are still part of the same doctrine. This is what your doctrine believes. This is what your doctrine practices. This is part of your doctrine's history. Whether the fact that you are ignorant is not my problem. That's your problem. If it embarrasses you, I don't know, go join a church. I've always loved the juxtaposition of creepy or weird things being presented as soft or cute. Now we're talking about children's toys and children's clothes, babies. Personally, I think Baphomet, a mystical deity, looks very charming in their pastel colors. Baphomet themselves is a mixture of genders. They hardly fit into binary stereotypes. And we know that Baphomet, before he became Satan in the 1800s, was Muhammad.
Yep, you covered that in the previous sessions. Go to the Gnostic roots of Islam and how Islam has influenced modern occult movements.
Yeah, no. And also, Kandan says, You're on the same team, Mao, like it or not. Yes, you're on the same team as Mao, Stalin, Lenin. You're on the same team. Think about this. You know, atheists call themselves, I've posted this recently in a video. Atheists call themselves scientific atheists. This is used by Dawkins, Harris, you name it. They call themselves scientific atheists. They practice scientific atheism, and they practice militant atheism. Who invented these terms? Well, a guy called Marx and a guy called Engels, right? And the Soviets were scientific atheists. They practiced scientific atheism. It was the official ideology of the Soviet state, of the communist state, right? So now, hold on. Let's see. And they were required, and I will be covering all of this as we go, but they were also required to spread the quote-unquote propaganda of atheism. This was official government Soviet policy. They had to spread the propaganda of atheism. Now, if you listen to the propaganda of atheism from the Soviets, it's identical to what modern atheists like yourself, that's you I'm pointing at, say today. There's no difference. Now, let's see. The 2023 atheist calls himself a scientific atheist. He calls himself a militant atheist. They practice militant atheism. They practice scientific atheism. It's exactly the same names as used by Marx, Stalin, Lenin, Mao, Pol Pot, all of the worst genocidal murderers in all of history. And your propaganda is word for word the very same as the propaganda practiced by these psychopathic atheist murderers. How are you different? Please explain to me how, when you have the same names and the very same propaganda, word for word, how are you different? How do we distinguish you from them? Please explain. Drop it in the comment. Lie to me. Atheism is a doctrine. It has written books on how to atheize, or whatever you want to call it. They will say that, but blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and I know that makes perfect sense to me too. You heard that. I said it. I meant it. But understand that atheists don't realize they are deliberately ignorant of their history because their history is shameful and embarrassing to them. Two, it is a doctrine. Atheists, the village atheists, of which you are a fine example, thank you, want to claim there is no doctrine in atheism. Unfortunately, the sciences, academia, disagrees with you. I have another series where I've got about 70 plus, okay, almost 80 definitions of atheism from something like 75 academic encyclopedias and academic textbooks from Princeton, Yale, Oxford, Cambridge, you name it. I've got the foremost atheists in the world who've written books. I've got the books. These are the top academics on earth. And unfortunately, when you look at all of these definitions, they all say atheism is a doctrine, a system of belief. It has a whole bunch of rules, and there's books explain how to atheist. It's not just a lack of belief. Sadly, you're lying to yourself, but you're not lying to me, Sam, or anyone else in the chat. Atheism is a doctrine. It is a belief. It is an entire corpus of beliefs. Just like any religion, it was founded explicitly as a religion. I will move on because hopefully, you know, if you're slow, I can't help you. So this is from the historian Sir Simon Schama, brilliant man as well. So the churches were often stripped of all priestly objects. There were urgent practical reasons for this theft. Church bells were needed for the arms foundries, gold and silver for the Republic's treasury, because they needed to make weapons. They had Christians to go and kill, don't you know? Through a great deal of the latter, though a great deal of the latter certainly found its way into the pockets of the de-Christianizers. But there was also pure vandalism on a massive scale. Altarpieces were slashed, stained glass windows broken, devotional manuals and hymnals were burned in great bonfires, together with the plaster and wood saints found on every road crossing, crackling and melting in flames like the inanimate victims of an auto da fe. That Simon, so these people were incredibly anti-Christian. They were incredibly destructive when they came across Christian symbolism, which is actually, oddly enough, again, what happened to the Catholic Church during the Protestant Reformation and what Muslims do. It's no different. Now, if you practice the same things, if you use the same names, if you call yourself by the same name that Marx called himself, if you practice the same thing that Marx practiced, and if you use exactly the same word-for-word propaganda that Marx, Lenin, Stalin, and Mao, and even Hitler used, how are you different from them? Please show me how your propaganda is different from that of Marx and Lenin and Mao and Stalin. You're saying the same things. How are you different? Please explain to me. Don't dodge. Just explain to me. Yes, I have the very same name Lenin used. I have the very same name Stalin used. I call myself by the same title. I use exactly the same propaganda word for word, but I'm not like Stalin. Please explain to me how you're different. Priests were made, so reason became an 18th century pride parade. Priests were made to confess that they had lied, that they misled people, They had to publicly renounce their belief and functions as ministers of the church. They had to declare that they henceforth would recognize no public worship, but only the worship of liberty, equality, and fraternity. In other words, they would practice state atheism in state churches and give state sermons, state-backed sermons in atheism. And these are very much the same as communist struggle sessions. There was a Prussian nobleman. Now, the Prussians originally were pagans. They were the enemies of the Poles. They were chased out of Poland in the 1400s eventually. They are pagans. And of course, they came back as, well, under Bismarck, you can say they came back before then, into Poland to have their revenge. He called himself and was known as a personal enemy of God, a personal enemy of Jesus Christ. He was known as the speaker for mankind, or the orator of mankind. He was an avowed atheist. His name was Anacharsis, which he took from this Travels of Anacharsis the Younger in Greece. And his name was Jean-Baptiste Cloutz, and he declared that the Republic would contain only one God, the people. Now, the festival of reason was lurid, licentious, and scandalous, and basically it became sexual debauchery. So the term lurid means causing horror or revulsion, shocking, sensational, melodramatic, and licentious. Now, remember, they spoke of when we saw Anton LaVey, they mentioned that people would have an opportunity to express themselves using this kind of, this really outspoken, sensational sessions. Now you're seeing the same idea is still present. You got to bring your whole self to work, right? You got to be, let it all out, let all your emotions out. No, there was no moral framework to guide them. They became sexually debauched. So licentious, disapproving, especially of a person or their behavior, which is sexual in an uncontrolled and socially unacceptable way. So Robespierre, the man of terror's state cult. So after the embarrassment of the cult of reason, because it crashed after a couple of years, the Freemason, and did I mention there was a lot of Freemasonry going on in France, Sam? There's a lot.
That you completely forgot that part. No, you did. Yeah.
Freemasonry, luckily, is religion of peace. Freemasons mean well. That they're lodges that are open to anyone, and they're just there to do good works, Sam. That's all they are. They got nothing to do with the French Revolution, and nothing to do with atheism either, oddly enough. And so the Freemason Robespierre achieved dictatorial power and decided to establish his own state religion called the Cult of the Supreme Being. Because, hey, let's try this again. Real state atheist religion has never been tried before. Okay, let me continue. Now we're going to go into some of the atrocities that were committed. Now, understand that according to the historians that I've read, the atrocities are even worse than I will illustrate here. They said it's even worse. It was horrific. Okay, this matches what happened during World War II by a certain group. All right. So let's look at the atheist atrocity at Nantes. Now remember, atheists are going to talk about the witches in America, those 19 witches that were killed. They're going to talk about 800-year-old atrocities in the French Revolution. In the whatever. I mean, they're going to go back in history to find, well, you Christians did X, Y, and Z. Now we're going to look at the very first atheist state committing the very first atheist atrocities. And the atheist atrocity at Nantes, this is one of many, right? The revolutionary atheists passed a law that all non-conforming clergy that would not renounce Christianity, remember what I said, atheism or death, right? Islam or death. Same thing, weird. All non-conforming clergy would be killed on sight. Anyone who harbored these enemies of the state was subject to death. Any family that harbored a priest or a nun would be murdered along with the priest or nun if found, children and all. Okay, the whole family would die. Jean-Baptiste Carrier enforced the law by loading priests and nuns like cattle onto boats, and he ferried them down the Loire River. They were stripped naked, and they were tied together in pairs, one priest to a nun, in what he called republican marriages designed to mock their vows of celibacy. They were then thrown overboard. They had a pole. Also, they were stuck a pole in with them to weigh them down. Then they were thrown overboard to drown. If there wasn't a nun, they would strap two priests together in a sexual pose. Let's just call it that. Okay? Two male priests would be strapped together. This proved too inefficient for mass executions. So, because these are rational, scientific atheists following Enlightenment principles, They decided to load the boats with as many people as they could and then sink the boats so that everyone would drown. So he sank the vessels with everyone trapped on board, drowning them in what was dubbed the national bathtub. Between 4,800 and 9,000 people are known to have been murdered in the drownings at Nantes, including innocent families with women and children, all in the cause of atheism. Now, atheists love to say, well, you know, an atheist might have done it, but not done in the name of atheism. This was policy. This was the atheist policy to become an atheist or die. Okay? Sam, up to you, because I want to lose my mind here.
Yeah, so you're basically confirming that these so-called rational, reasonable people who based everything on science tortured and murdered children, parents, even nuns and priests in some of the most inhumane fashions, like drowning them alive.
Oh, it gets worse, Sam. It gets worse. This is just this is an intro. So, according to historian Reynold Secher, a Frenchman who grew up in this area where this particular genocide happened, these murders are one component of a systematic government policy of extermination of the residents of the Vendée, planned by the Revolutionary Committee of Public Safety. They were called the Committee of Public Safety. And they were approved by vote, and they were passed into law of the National Convention in Paris on 1 October 1793. So, the Franco-French genocide by Reynold Secher. He's a very famous French historian. He grew up in this area called the Vendée. Okay, let's have a look here. He speaks of the following. According to Reynold Secher's thesis, the repression exercised in the Vendée corresponds to a proto-industrial genocide, a legal genocide which manifests itself by the vote. So these people passed laws prescribing the extermination of the men, the deportation of the women and children, and destruction of the territory that burned whole villages down. They prescribed the extermination of the brigands, okay? Many of the brigands happened to be embryos in the womb, babies and children of whom 110 are known to have been under 8 years old, right? Let's have a look at some of the means of extermination, some of the things these French atheists did. Anyway, Reynold Secher lists the various proto-industrial, so this is pre-industrial means implemented by the Committee of Public Safety. At Ponce de Ce, bags are made from men's or women's skin. Policemen's trousers are made from human skin. Bread ovens are used to burn the villagers alive in Luc-sur-Boulogne, and cremation then takes place in the church. Extermination camps are established in Noirmoutier. Unsuccessful gassing attempts were carried out by the chemist deputy. Unsuccessful gassing attempts. They tried to gas using poison gas to kill people in the area. Boats are sunk in the Loire. We've just spoken about that. And in Clisson, the fat is extracted by the carbonization of villages. It is used to make soap. We're going to talk about this. People had their skin removed to make bags and trousers. Okay? People were stuffed into ovens and cremated in ovens. Does this sound familiar, Sam?
Wow. The oven part, of course, Nazi Germany, but you said people were skinned and their fat was taken from them?
People, so I'll get into detail on all of this. This is recorded historically. This is recorded historically. This is atheism. These are atheists being rational, murdering Christians so that sanity will prevail and that superstition will be removed from the world. This is the rational thing to do. It's the scientific thing to do. So I will continue. Here. So Jean-Baptiste Carrier says, "Never have I had so much amusement as in seeing the last grimaces of priests as they die." Right? So let's continue. So the Vendée, a detailed narrative of the civil war in Western France at the height of the Reign of Terror from March 1793 to 95. Reynold Secher argues that the massacres from the conflict were not the inevitable result of fierce battle, but they were, and the laws were passed. This is law. The atheists passed law. They were premeditated, committed in cold blood, massive, and systematic, undertaken with the conscious and proclaimed will to destroy a well-defined region and to exterminate an entire people. Drawing upon previously unavailable historical sources, he's got the papers, he's got the receipts. More than 14% of the population was murdered in this conflict. His review of the social and political structures of the group represents a dramatically different image of the people of the Vendée than the stereotype common among historians that are favorable to the French Revolution. So because the Academy is so atheist, because the Academy is so socialist, they are favorable to the French Revolution narrative, and they've hidden all of this data. So his thesis at the Sorbonne is entitled The Franco-French Genocide. And people were systematically exterminated by the order of Robespierre. He says here about 117,000 civilians, including women and children, were massacred in order that the race of the Vendéans be obliterated as a hindrance to the progress of the revolution. Now, other historians have argued. They've said, no, you're lying, you're exaggerating the numbers. But then a bunch of new historians came along and said, actually, that number's probably too low by half. It's at least double. I mean, some people have doubled it again. So this number, I've seen numbers as high as 250,000 that were murdered. Okay. Now let's have a look. Égalité, liberté, fraternité, ou la mort. So equality, liberty, fraternity, or death. That was actually the chant. So this is General Westerman. He said, the Vendée is no more. It died under our swords with its women and children. I've just buried them in the swamps and the woods of Savonay. I don't have any prisoners. I killed all of them. They murdered the prisoners. They kept no prisoners. This is an illegal war crime. And he says, pity is not revolutionary. Pity is not revolutionary.
And these are the ancestors of atheism, socialism, Black Lives Matter.
This is the birth of modern atheism. Yes. This has been buried and hidden. This guy brought it to light. He went through the archives. He found the books. He found the records. He found the letters. I'll continue. This is called The Vendée, a French genocide by Reynaud Secha. He says here, Saint-Just, he was one of the guys running this whole campaign, in a report to the Commission of Extraordinary Means dated August 14, 1793. In Meudon, they are tanning human skin. Skin coming from men has a consistency and quality superior to chamois. Chamois is the kind of cloth that you used to use to clean your car with, right? Soft cloth. That from women subjects is suppler, but has less strength. Right? In Clisson, on April 5, 1794, soldiers of General Cruzat burned 150 women to extract the fat from them. We made holes in the ground. We placed cauldrons to catch what fell. We had put iron bars above and set the women on top. Then above them was the fire. 2 of my comrades were with me for this affair. I sent 10 casks of it, or 10 barrels of it, to Nantes. It was like embalming fluid. It was used in hospitals. They willfully burned 150 women to death to get their fat.
And these women were burned alive. They were being burned alive?
To my knowledge, yes.
And this is atheism, this is rational, this is reasonable.
This is atheists. Because they'll say, well, you know, an atheist did it. It wasn't done in the name of atheism. No, these were atheists they were saying, you either become an atheist or you die. And this is what happened. Hundreds of thousands of people died. So, yeah. So understand, this is death in the name of atheism. This is the result of atheism. This is what they hide. This is what they're ashamed of. You can see the French genocide, okay? The Franco-French genocide. I've just showed you this, means of extermination. I've just showed you that article. That's in the French. Now, atheism will end war as soon as they kill everyone who disagrees with them. Because atheists constantly tell me atheism will bring reason and will end war because religion causes wars. That is a lie. That's a flat-out lie. So, the president of the district expressed surprise in January 25. Your soldiers indulge in debauchery and the horrors of which even cannibals are incapable. Everywhere we go, we bring fire and death. Neither age nor sex nor anything else is respected. Yesterday, we burned a village. They mean they killed everyone in the village by burning them. A volunteer killed 3 women with his bare hands. It is horrible, but the safety of the Republic urgently requires it. Every person we see, we shoot. The earth is littered with corpses. Rape and the most outrageous barbarity show up at every turn. Republican soldiers rape rebel women on stones piled on the sides of the main roads and then shoot and stab them when they leave their embraces. We have seen others carrying nursing babies on the point of a bayonet or a pike that had run through mother and child in a single stroke. Yes, and it gets worse. Baudisson, general manager of military supplies, said the road from Villers to Cholet was littered with corpses, with victims with their throats cut. General Avril rejoiced in having put down the rebels of Saint-Lefort to the number of 100. A number of them were roasted when all the houses in town were burned. There were poor girls, completely naked, hanging from tree branches, hands tied behind their backs after having been raped. A girl from La Chapelle was taken by torturers who raped her and then hung her head down from an oak. Each leg was attached separately to a branch of the tree and then separated from one another as far as possible. In that position, they split her body in two with a sword all the way to her head and then cut her in two. In the castle of La Vrelay, whatever, Frenchy, two girls tried to take two girls away as prisoners. One of them clung to her crippled mother's chair. A soldier, furious at being unable to make her let go, took his sword and cut off her hand. In other cases, women were thrown out of windows onto bayonets pointed in their direction. There were many more atrocities on that day. And there's a street where the corpses were piled up and from which flowed a stream of blood as far as Le Gagneux. And children in their cradles were pierced and still carried breathing on the points of bayonets. And in fact, there are reports, written reports, that state that they would have babies on bayonets and they would throw babies also off the balconies, catch them on bayonets, and then they would throw them from bayonet to bayonet. They would throw the babies and catch them again on the bayonets. Because they weren't atheists, they deserved to die. They were enemies of the state because they were not atheist. So, yeah. So, guys, does this put a different spin on atheism? Does this tell you how satanic, how immoral, how depraved, how violent, how disgusting atheism actually is when it has power? Sam, your thoughts so far?
I want people to pay attention. This is actual history, historical facts that's documented. So here's my, and I don't want to belabor the point. Here's my statement to you effeminate sissies out there. You who think you're doing Jesus a favor, and you think that you're being pious by being weak, effeminate queers. I'm sorry, I'm politically incorrect. It is this effeminate Christianity that's going to get us murdered. There's nothing in the Bible that says you cannot defend your life, the life of your loved ones, the life of those who cannot defend for themselves, and the life of your land. If this isn't proof, you need to be ready and armed and prepared to defend these young children like these girls. You see what they did to one girl? Not only did they rape her, but they split her in half. Or this other girl was holding to the chair of her crippled mother and they cut off her hand. And taking babies and flinging them on bayonets or throwing them off where there's a bayonet waiting for them to land on. If this doesn't encourage you to be prepared to defend your life, the life of your parents, the life of your children, your spouses, especially children who cannot protect themselves, because you think Jesus wants you to be a pacifist, you are a disgrace, you are disgusting, and you are the trouble, because your effeminate form of Christianity will bring destruction upon Christianity. May God preserve his church and make us not just militant spiritually, but militarily if we have to. So go ahead, brother.
So do you understand? This is satanic. This is depraved. This is no different to what the communists did. This is no different to what Mr. Little Mustache did. This is the source of that. This is the philosophy that birthed that. Atheism was born in blood. It was born in irrationality. And they dare to call you irrational. They dare to call your beliefs. This is atheist atrocity committed by atheists in the name of atheism who consciously wrote laws to murder Christians. This is what atheists did. You need to confront them with this. Seriously, the atheists have no leg to stand on. Once you look at the religion of atheism, at its history, it is sick. It is vile. Kendrick says, yeah, I'm currently in high school. Well, people in university have not heard of this, which is frightening. Right? A surgeon named Thomas wrote, I've seen women and men burned. I've seen 150 soldiers mistreat and rape women, girls of 14 and 15, and then massacre them and toss from bayonet to bayonet tender infants left next to their mothers, stretched out on the ground. Now, yeah, so what can I say about that?
Atheists are even more barbaric and brutal in the way they torture, murder people than even Muslims, right?
I would think so, because there's a certain set of rules, morality. But don't forget, the atheists wanted to break all rules. They have no rules to break all norms.
They're worse animals than Muslims, because Muslims have
Do
certain
what
rules.
Yeah.
Yeah. So atheism has no rules. The way they can torture you and kill
Yeah,
you.
I mean, do what thou wilt is the whole of the law. That was effectively the rallying. That is the atheist morals. Sorry, that is the Satanist moral stance. But we know that atheism and Satanism are perfectly compatible. They are, atheism is satanic and Satanism is atheist, right? And obviously, at the end of the day, Satan does exist. Satan they just believe he doesn't for whatever reasons, but they are following the will of Satan, because it's not the will of God. Right? Now, let's have a look at the atheists and the nuns of Compiègne. The Reign of Terror flooded the streets with innocent blood, claiming over 40,000 victims. Now, I don't know if this is relative just to Paris, because hundreds of thousands of people died. Okay, some numbers go up to 500,000. I can vouch for 280, 290, 300,000 easily. Right? People who died horrifically. On July 17, 1794, the martyrs of Compiègne were led to the guillotine in Paris. The government, the atheist, I should need to state this, the Freemason atheist government, whatever, you choose your adjectives, had ordered all convents to disband. These nuns refused to split apart, and they kept their community together. They refused to shut down their convent. The revolutionary atheists judged the nuns as traitors for their defiance, and they condemned them to beheading. Each woman went bravely to the blade, while the other nuns sang a hymn, which grew softer as their numbers dwindled, until at last the final voice was silenced. The Mother Superior was the last to be beheaded and killed. The revolutionary... Sorry?
Sorry, Lord. I'm sorry, I had to interrupt. You're going to make me cry at the boldness. Honestly, I'm about to cry. So here you have... Oh, man. I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but do you see that?
What?
Nuns who love Jesus Christ more than their life, who went to the guillotine singing hymns praising Jesus like the early church fathers, died boldly without recanting. These women showing more bravery than us men. Go ahead, brother. I just had to say that.
So the revolutionary government of France fell just 10 days after the nuns were murdered. And I should mention that the guillotine is named after the Freemason and atheist Joseph Ignace Guillotin. He didn't invent it, but it is named after the Freemason. So if you want to tell me Freemasonry is a religion of peace, I'll tell you to F off. Yeah, sorry, man. This upsets me. This makes me very, very angry. To know this and to have done all this reading and done all this work. So hopefully I've been tying atheism to Satanism, to genocide, to socialism. We're going to be doing a lot of tying it to socialism. We're going to spend a significant amount of time. And just so you know, spoiler, socialism was designed explicitly and specifically as an atheistic religion. Socialism is a religion. It is a theology. Please understand this. They wanted a religion that they could utilize for their own beliefs, a container to hold their own beliefs, but to strip everything of the divine from it. So now we're going to have a look at a man called Kropotkin. And this is his book, The Great French Revolution. Of course, it was great because lots of scholars, lots of atheists, lots of crazy people, lots of people who love their violence think it was awesome, because this was the atheist wet dream, right? The French Revolution was the atheist wet dream. So, yeah, Peter Kropotkin. What we learn today from the study of the Great Revolution is that it was the source and origin of all the present communist, anarchist, and socialist conceptions. Okay, so he tells us that the French Revolution was the origin of all the present communist, anarchist, and socialist conceptions. In other words, these atheists had come up, they had implemented all of the fantasies of the communists, the anarchists, and the socialists. Kropotkin says, up till now, modern socialism has added absolutely nothing to the ideas that were circulating among the French people between 1789 and 1794. In fact, there are other statements where they say that basically all of these ideas that the communists, Marx and Lenin and Engels and Stalin and Lenin and all these guys came up with, these things were around before the French Revolution in the 1700s as part of the Enlightenment. So the Enlightenment birthed these ideas, and the French Revolution implemented them. And so modern socialism added absolutely nothing to the ideas that were circulating in the French Revolution, and which it was tried to put into practice in the year 2 of the Republic during the Reign of Terror. So these are socialist ideals. This was the socialist atheist revolution, the very first one in history. Anarcho-communism's main theorist is Peter Kropotkin. He was a child of the Enlightenment and the Scientific Revolution. He was a wealthy man, apparently, I believe, born into a wealthy family or from a noble family. He assumed that religion would be replaced by science and that the church, as well as the state, would be abolished. You see? Just like these atheists, these radical Enlightenment thinkers wanted everything to be abolished. Religion would be replaced by science and the church and the state would be abolished. The noblest man, the one really greatest of them all, was Prince Peter Kropotkin, a self-professed atheist. What a surprise. My gosh, I thought he'd be a Baptist. Wow. And a great man of science. And that's from Eli Robert Erskine, October 1941, the New York World Telegram newspaper. And the Soviet atheists, as you know, were all scientific atheists, and they also used the title militant atheists. So maybe I should end here, Sam. I think I've done plenty. I'll end here.
We are going to do as many series as he wants in this, and I hope he does do something on Darwin and show how Darwin influenced this filth, this garbage, this wicked, evil system from the pit of hell. And yet, here's what's more heartbreaking. You have Christian philosophers who try to marry the theories of Charles Darwin with Christianity to show they're compatible, and yet these useful idiots do not see that this system was developed to destroy the Christian worldview, to destroy the Christian church, to destroy faith in the Bible. But now they're adopting it and trying to marry it with Christianity. And some of them are world-renowned, like William Lane Craig. May God rebuke and chasten them to repent of this filth, and the Lord save people from their influence. So just wanted to highlight that. There was one point I wanted to see. You said you read something, free education. This is what I want to comment. Did you guys see why he wanted free education? What they're doing to us in the public schools. They want your children to go to public schools, free education. Now you see the satanic agenda in the public schools, which I didn't know until you just quoted it. Free education, meaning you send them to these public schools that are financed by the government, because we will then indoctrinate and brainwash them to make them zombies to follow our satanic agenda, which is exactly what's happening in the public school system. And that's what he wanted, huh? Free education.
Yeah, look, we'll talk more about this. I'll definitely get into more of that in the future, because let me just find my place. They want that for exactly those reasons. And I'll talk about how they infiltrated the schools from their own writings. And we'll talk about this, how these atheists decided, how they took over the academy. And this is why they hide all of this information, because if people realize just how filthy, how absolutely dirty, filthy atheism is in its history, and once it seizes power, how dirty and depraved it becomes, how violent and genocidal it becomes, people would obviously reject it. That's why atheists have to use sophistry to claim it's just a lack of belief, so that you don't look any further beyond that. Just look up the genocide of the Vendée. That was something, you can find the books, you will find them. I have an archive with all of this material is in my archive, right? Go check any description box of any of my videos. You'll find the links to my archive. Please use this. Talk to people about it. Share that. Learn it. Apply it. When you see atheists on social media, ask them these questions. Say, look, you used the name scientific atheist. So did Lenin. So did Marx. So did Stalin. So did Mao. So did all of these crazy psychopaths, these genocidal people. You use the same title and you are literally repeating the same propaganda. How are you different? They don't like this information. They don't want this public. Fight back.